Hey guys, thanks for tuning back in. This is Justin from the Grumpy Nostalgia Podcast. We felt compelled to offer a disclaimer before we get into this week's episode. We like to recognize the passing of one of our heroes and legends, Ozzy Osbourne. But unfortunately, prior to his death, we recorded this episode, and let's just say we had a little fun at Ozzy's expense. And it's not the first time that we've talked about someone on the podcast and they've subsequently passed away. James Caan, Piper Laurie, Paul Rubens, just to name a few. In order to not become the harbingers of death, we thought we'd at least put this disclaimer out that says that we love Ozzy, and we always will, and we are truly saddened by his passing. So when you hear these gentle knocks on the Prince of Darkness here, know that it was not personal, and we were unaware of his unfortunate passing. So on a lighter note, if you have any enemies of yours that you'd like us to take care of, just give us their name and we'll mention them on the podcast, and who knows, let's see what happens. All that notwithstanding, please enjoy this week's episode, and as always, thanks for listening.
Quiet, numbskulls, I'm broadcasting.
Hey kids, welcome to Grumpy Nostalgia, the Second Look Cinema Podcast, the show where we go back to that blockbuster new release wall of our memory, we grab a copy off the shelf, we pop it in our VCR, and we see what time has done to it. I'm Justin, that's Mike.
Once.
Together we're here to help you navigate all those landmines littered down memory lane. So happy summer, guys. We're back live in the studio. We appreciate you coming back. We put you through 2 weeks of extreme heat and Nick Cage. Two things that probably don't go well together, right?
Brutal.
Not exactly a chocolate peanut butter situation, but we appreciate you tuning in again. We hope you enjoyed those little walks down memory lane.
Was it a Castor and Pollux kind of situation?
It was certainly one of those for sure. But we felt he deserved like a one last salvo tribute before we moved on in our lives. So the hero of ours in the 90s. So we decided this week we want to talk about something different. So we're gonna go from 90s trash to 80s thrash, Mike.
Nice.
To talk about the much maligned yet cult classic now. This is Spinal Tap from 1984.
Yes.
One of the greatest rock and roll movies ever made. But you couldn't have attested to that at the time, Mike. It was a much maligned movie when it started. We'll get to some of that. It's rough beginnings, but a bad beginning is usually a good ending, Mike. So
it's a definition of a cult classic.
Exactly. So let's just jump right in because it's too hot and we got other things to do. So this was directed by our friend Rob Reiner, of course, Mike, who's famous for All in the Family, Meathead.
Meathead. This is like, what, the fourth movie we've done by him now?
We've done a handful of his movies for sure. I haven't got to the real good ones yet. I think this is like North.
Right North.
Yeah. But this was written by a trio of guys. It was written by Lenny from Lenny and the Squigtones, Mr. Jamie Lee Curtis, and Mr. Byrne. That's Michael McKean, Christopher Guest, and Harry Shearer, for those that are not in the know like we are. These guys were all three Saturday Night writers for sure. They wrote a lot of stuff in collaboration. Also started doing all these, invented this genre of the mockumentary, Mike. Christopher Guest has really kind of led the charge on that. That includes movies like Mighty Wind, For Your Consideration, Waiting for Guffman, of course, Best in Show, which is one of my favorite movies of all time. Had a measly budget of $2.5 million, and it was released in the early spring of 1984, March 2nd, to be exact. So this cast was part of the reason it was a bit of a bomb when it came out because, well, we'll get to, there's several reasons why this movie wasn't well received at the beginning. It's hard to believe that people didn't like this movie at one point in our culture, but the cast had a little bit to do with that. A bunch of no names at the time, Mike. So why don't you walk us through some of these incognito at the time actors and who have since come on to be too really plastered all over pop culture history. So walk us through the cast.
Yeah, sure. Like you said, we had Lenny, Michael McKean, who he had one of those career renaissance kind of thing where like he didn't get, he was in Laverne and Shirley, and then all of a sudden later on he pops up as an older character in all these shows like Better Call Saul. And
he's been in like over 250 projects over his career, though.
It's crazy. Yeah, the last few years too. So many different little roles he's been in.
Yeah.
Christopher Guest, as you mentioned, who was also in Saturday Night Live along with Harry Shearer, but they were kind of maligned castmates, because they were in that era of Saturday Night Live that nobody watched, in the mid '80s, where had Billy Crystal, and
Yeah.
because they weren't the original cast, nobody liked them, and they weren't Eddie Murphy, so they kind of
Yeah.
were like
Unfairly
they got
shown.
swept
Yeah.
under the rug, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. But they
Very,
star
very
as
creative senses of humor, though. Yeah.
Oh, for sure. Yeah, just almost too creative for like a mainstream
Like they
kind
weren't
of
ready for prime
Saturday Night
time.
Live audience. Exactly.
Yeah.
Wow.
Wow. How appropriate.
And they star as the band Spinal Tap. At least three members of it. They have well, David is Michael McKean character. Nigel is the guitarist, and Derek, who's the bass player, played by Harry Shearer.
Yeah.
And they're all in the movie. The premise of the movie is they're interviewed by Rob Reiner, who's also the director, but he's filming his own documentary, which is, like you said, a mockumentary.
Yeah.
And even a couple of like the past or future alums from mockumentaries, like Ed Begley Jr. and what's his face, Fred Willard, show up in this one too. So you kind of get that
Yeah.
preemptive strike of like, oh, these you're gonna see some of these people later on. You had the pairing of Bruno Kirby and Billy Crystal before When Harry Met Sally and City Slickers, even like
Yeah.
you get to see these two guys in the movie and in small roles but very effective roles.
Yeah.
And then you had people like Dana Carvey and Angelica Houston of all people in this movie, and it was
Yeah.
just kind of, I guess, a lot of friends of friends kind of thing, that knew these guys, and
Yeah.
that was pretty much your cast. Like I said, the fact that I can't forget Fran Drescher. How could I forget her?
How could you
But
forget? Yeah.
but in fact, that focuses on this rock group as they go through, and
Yeah.
that's all you need to know. So there's your cast.
Yeah. So Rob Reiner's funny because he was an actor who became a director and he was an actor playing a director in this film. So he's all
Yeah.
over the place. Christopher Guest, of course, he's actually royalty, Mike. He's a couple of generations removed from British royalty. So that was kind of cool. Michael McKean, he's married to Annette O'Toole,
Okay.
wonderful redhead from the original It series, and Lana Lang from Superman 3.
Yes. Okay.
Right. Very nice. Of course, Harry Shearer, he's famous for The Simpsons, of course. He plays 21 characters on The Simpsons, which is amazing, given his vocal range to play that many characters, but it's true. Interesting trivia about Harry here. He was the original Eddie Haskell in the pilot of Leave It to Beaver. But his parents didn't want him to have a full-term commitment, so they pulled him, and then the actor that came in behind him played the Eddie Haskell. But see,
Wow.
entertaining and informative, Mike.
That's
Rocky
really good.
nostalgia registered trademark.
Ken Osmond.
Yeah, that's right. Very good, Mike.
There you go. I knew I could pull that one.
And Jerry Mathers as the Beaver. Just some note on this cast. They all played their own music, of course. These guys are all very talented musicians. Yeah, and that includes the drummers and the keyboardists as well. They were so good, in fact, that Ozzy Osbourne thought that this was a real band.
No, no.
Well, of course, we can't account for much. We can't blame Ozzy in the '80s for much of his decisions at that point or whatever. But unfortunately, Liam Gallagher from Oasis, the reformed Oasis, he actually played with them, and he still thought they were a real band. So there you go. Thinking about Christopher Guest, he's so beloved within the rock community and for pop culture in general. When he bought one of the first Teslas ever made, the design engineers at Tesla put all his gauges to 11 on his car, which is fantastic.
That's funny.
Yeah, but of course, Lenny, we know from Lenny and the Squigtones. Hello. One of our favorite '70s novelties from Laverne and Shirley, Mike, of course. This was back in 1984. In theaters around March, you had the movie Footloose, Running Wild, another music-based movie. This came out on the 2nd, along with Against All Odds.
Oh, nice.
We talked about it a little before. Pretty good. The week after this, you had Children of the Corn and Splash came out, robbing some of this film's box office even more. And then, of course, a week later, you had Romancing the Stone and Police Academy come out, and that kind of took over spring until this busy, epic 1984 summer. And we'll get to the cultural relevance of 1984 from a cinema standpoint here in a minute. The biggest movies that year, of course, were Ghostbusters, Indiana Jones and the Temple of Doom, Gremlins, Karate Kid, and Beverly Hills Cop were the top 5. But
Wow. How can you
loaded
compete
up,
against that?
loaded up. Best picture that year was Terms of Endearment, not a laugh riot, as this was. On the music scene, Mike, because this is a blend of film and music, apropos that Jump, the song Jump was the number one song movie that came out by Van Halen. On this charts right behind it were 99 Luftballons by Nina, German rocker Nina. All those other songs she did too, right? Those are good too. Girls Just Want to Have Fun by Cyndi Lauper was number three. Number four was Thriller by Michael Jackson. And number five was Nobody Told Me by John Lennon. So even the music scene, Mike, just look at that murderer's row of music that we were listening to at the same time. Just amazing.
Strange days indeed.
Yes, some other things going on in 1985 that may be of interest to no one except me and Mike. This is the year that Andy Kaufman died, or did he, Mike? Jury's still out. This is the year that they introduced the first CD player. So we were inundated with CDs in the later half of the 90s as a result of this. We were watching The Fall Guy, Knight Rider, and the A-Team, the television
Oh,
shows.
wow.
Those were so well received that 40 years later we decided to make movies out of them because we couldn't think of anything else to do. The movie tickets would cost you $2.50. Gas to get you there would cost you $1.27 a gallon. We were all excited about the space shuttle, Mike. That was the inaugural launch of Discovery. That was a big thing. We don't go to space anymore, Mike. It's can't afford it.
Too dangerous.
Too dangerous, yeah. This is the year that the Bonkers candy came out, Mike. Remember that was the rectangular taffy that had a juicy center. Those are fantastic. One of my favorite candies of all time. Sadly extinct. They also invented Cowtails this year, Mike, which is
Oh,
the
wow.
Getz caramel version of the Bullseye, which
I
was,
wonder what state likes that candy the most.
I wonder. And of course, Willy Wonka had his hand at things too with introducing Runts this year. Guaranteed to break teeth or any other associated bridge work.
Or get lost in your cushions of your couch or your car.
Yep, they're always there, always in the always in
Among
the wheel.
nerds. Yeah.
Yeah. Some could argue this is the greatest pop culture of all time, Mike, given the stuff we talked about there. But I think this movie, in hindsight, really supported that fact. So I think there's nothing left to do but just kind of jump in and talk about what we saw here. So, Mike, if you're ready, please hit the button.
Might as well jump.
Might as well jump. So, depending on what year and where you saw this, in some theaters in early releases, they had had a disclaimer that this was not a real band.
Oh, really?
Just to help Ozzy Osbourne out, probably. But it starts out with Rob Reiner talking to the audience in his Air Force carrier cap. He plays a character, Marty DeBurgi, who's a documentary filmmaker. He gives a little background about a band called Spinal Tap that he wanted to introduce and do a film about. And he starts off by saying, "Let's boogie," Mike, as previously mentioned. So, and then you get introduced to the members of the band. Here you got Nigel, played by Christopher Guest, who was based off Jeff Beck, Mike.
Okay.
You can kind of see his look at least.
The hair is spot on.
Yeah. You had David here. You got David
Gibbons.
Saint Nibbins, who's named after the patron saint of quality footwear, uh, played by Michael McKean. And then you got Derek, played by Harry Shearer, who was fashioned after Lemmy when Lemmy was sporting those big mutton chops. Mike.
Yes.
So they do a little quick interview with those guys, just to introduce their backstory, and you start to learn right away about the band's history, checkered history, and they kind of morph with the times. Like they started in the early '60s as a folk band, and they kind of went to an English pop band.
I love the pictures they show them is like
Yeah,
the squares.
we also get introduced to their somewhat tragic history with drummers, Mike. They have quite a bit of turnover there, Mike. A lot of unfortunate stuff, and we'll get to that here in a minute. But it kind of cuts back to this kind of New York launch party where they're having a party on the rooftop of Manhattan, and they're celebrating the release of their album "Smell the Glove," Mike. And a guy that identifies as Sir Dennis Eaton Hogg, who plays the record company executive, gives them a toast and wishes them the well-being on their North American tour, and that kind of sets the stage for the movie. There's some interesting cameos, as you mentioned here, Mike. You see Dana Carvey and Billy Crystal playing mimes that are serving food.
Whoa, what do you got here? What do you got so much here for? What is this?
I don't know. They're not eating this tonight.
Why not? It's good. Did you do the walk in the wind?
I did the win. I did
Let me
it
see.
like you said. Watch.
No. You don't push it away. The wind comes up. By the time
I
you
was
get
doing
there,
the win all night.
Nah, did you do the dead bird?
Which is funny. Fran Drescher plays a publicity agent who's got some great lines here as well. They go back to the interview session. They talk about their past, and we introduced their first drummer was Ed Begley Jr. But he died in a gardening accident. They say, Mike, and he's replaced by Stumpy Joe, Stumpy Peeps. But he choked on vomit, but not his, Mike.
That's right.
It was actually someone else's vomit. It's not exactly. There's no real.
Well, they can't prove whose vomit it was. They don't have facilities in Scotland Yard to print.
You can't really dust for vomit.
It's a mishmash between band interviews and like documentary footage of when they're on tour. So the first kind of documentary set is they go to Atlanta, where they understand that some of their gigs have been canceled due to some controversy about the album design of Smell the Glove, Mike. Which it turns out is a naked woman on all fours, oiled up, smelling a glove pushed in her face. And they don't understand why that's that's offensive. But we get introduced here that their band manager, played by actor Tony Hendra, a really underappreciated role here, Ian Faith, who's tries to keep he's the glue that keeps the band together. And he actually takes the time to explain to them why they had mentioned another musician had a much more provocative cover than theirs. He goes,
because he's the victim. Their objections were that she was the victim. You see, that's all right. I mean, if the singer's the victim, it's different. It's not sexist.
He did a twist on it.
He did.
Twist, and it's
we should have thought of that.
We were so close.
I mean, if we had all you guys tied up, that probably would have been fine. But it's still a stupid.
It's such a fine line between stupid and clever. Yeah.
he has to explain all these things to them like they're children, including tempering their egos and their anger when a particular scene I love where Christopher Guest is angry about craft services and the food backstage and about the size of the bread, Mike. He doesn't like the little cocktail rise that he says it's too big for the lunch meat. He doesn't like to fold things.
It's funny how they touch on so many things you hear about like bands in the past. So like the writers they have are wanting certain foods, or like the lead singer David having his girlfriend with him is kind of like the Yoko Ono kind of effect.
They kind of captured all those the dirty underbelly of a lot of rock stuff. Like that writer thing was a direct response to David Lee Roth, writer for Dave Van Halen, where they didn't want any brown M&Ms.
Eminem, that's classic.
Yeah, he claims it was just to show that prove that people were actually reading it, but there's got to be a little more than that. I've read some of those concert writers on SmokingGun.com, and it's not just about recognition. It's about we'll get to that later, I suppose. So they're in Atlanta, kind of licking their wounds about the loss of some of their shows, and they're listening to the radio, and one of their older songs comes on. Listen to the Flower People, right? And it's a classic send up of that 60s love rock that they trying to transition into.
Listen to what the flower people say. Ah, listen, it's getting louder every day.
And they're reminiscing and having a great time. And then like the DJ comes in and goes, that was Spinal Tap. Currently featured on the Where Are They Now page. And that it was kind of heartbreaking to see their reaction.
It is.
To that,
Yeah. Uh-huh.
Yeah. And the DJ here was actually Harry Shearer. That was Harry Shearer's voice. But this is like the kind of foreshadowing to the rest of the movie. And it kind of really, it's a very emotional film because these guys are just music artists. They play music, and they're losing their popularity. They're losing their fan base, and they're having a hard time kind of dealing with it.
It's a big stretch of the movie. It's almost depressing,
It's really awkward to watch.
A little bit, but it's part of the charm of these mockumentaries, even the ones they do later on. That it's the uncomfortability of it. Just watching it is.
There's a great scene where they go to Memphis, and of course they go to Graceland, and they're standing around Elvis's memorial there. And when I went to Graceland, that was the first place I went because I remember that scene in Spinal Tap.
Yeah,
and they try to have a harmony about Heartbreak Hotel, and that scene, was great. This is also where David's girlfriend, as you mentioned, Janine, shows up, and she's kind of the Yoko here.
Yeah,
and she's there to introduce this extra element of conflict in the band. She wants a little creative control, and David and Nigel are the John and Paul element of this band, and they're the creative team, and she's kind of wedging herself in there with David's help, and that's kind of creating a rift in the band, and that kind of sets the stage for what's going to happen a little bit later. They go to Chicago, which was a great. I love the scene in Chicago where they're there for a record signing and no one shows up.
Yeah.
And the record promoter, played by a very young Paul Schaefer, is just apologizing for them. You get the famous line, "See this ass guy?"
Do me a favor. Just kick my ass, okay? Kick this ass for a man, that's all. Kick my ass. No. Enjoy. Come on. I'm not asking, I'm telling with this. Kick my ass.
There's a great thing where, Derek's got that horrible cold and there's nobody there. They're sitting in this empty record store and he's just sniffing and snorting and blowing his nose. It's fantastic. They make their way to Cleveland. This is another famous scene the documentary scene where they're backstage getting ready, jacked up, and they've actually got a full house for this one, Mike. But they can't. This legendary scene, of course, they get lost. They can't find the stage. And you think this is, funny, but the truth is stranger than fiction. This has happened to a lot of bands. Famously, Bob Dylan once could not find the stage from his dressing room, and Gene Simmons professed that happened to Kiss several times, where they were 20 minutes late to their show because they couldn't find the stage. But they're just wandering through and the cameraman's following them. They keep screaming, rock and roll, rock and roll.
Oh, bro.
It's a vain attempt to keep their energy up. There's a scene where they go to the Albuquerque, and this is where things really start to go on the wayside. They've lost most of their gigs in the Midwest. Things are really starting to be bad. And then by the time they get to New Mexico, they're booked as an opening act for a kid's magician. And it was a complete bust. And they kind of come off that performance just kind of crestfallen. And this is where Janine comes in and starts recommending that she's got some artistic vision for the band where they all have these interesting costumes that they wear. They're based on her zodiac signs, Mike, and Nigel doesn't want anything to do with it. He says when they make his Hail Mary here, Nigel says, what we need is to go back to what we did best. And he wants to go to performance rock. And he suggests that they do their Stonehenge theatrical thing.
Oh, yeah.
He actually writes down on a napkin the dimensions of this big Stonehenge monument they want to put on stage. And of course, Ian takes it to the designer, who's played by Angelica Houston here, of course. And he designs it for 18 inches tall. It's one hash mark short of feet. And Ian just lets it go, and they're playing the show that night, and they get this dramatic pause in the Gothic song, and Nigel does his druid tale, and they lower this 18-inch Stonehenge.
My favorite scene in the movie.
And to help with the scale, they have a couple dwarves dance around it while he's playing the mandolin solo. And of course, after backstage after that, that's where things just kind of go loose.
Nigel's had it.
Nigel /quits /gets fired, takes his cricket bat to the hotel room, and he leaves the band, leaving Janine in charge, Mike, which again just dials up the tension in the band one more time. They make one of their last shows. They go to California, where they go to Stockton, and they're at second bill to a puppet show.
Oh no!
Right.
If I told them once, I told them 100 times to put Spinal Tap first and puppet show last.
It's a morale builder, isn't it?
We've got a big dressing room though. So,
what?
Got a big dressing room.
Oh, we've got a bigger dressing room than the puppets, so that's refreshing.
So they're backstage, and getting prepared, and they don't have Nigel because Nigel had quit the show before where they were playing an Air Force base, and his radio receiver started picking up, his guitar radio receiver amp started picking up air traffic signs, and he had enough. He just got his guitar and storms off, leaving the band. And I love that interview with him after Rob Reiner asks Michael McKean, why aren't you more upset, that Nigel's left? He goes,
well, I'm sure I'd feel much worse if I weren't under such heavy sedation, but still in all, I mean, you've got to be realistic about this sort of thing,
Just very casually. But they're playing the Stockton, California gig, and they don't know what to do because Nigel's not there to play any of his lead guitars, and no one could play the part. So they call an audible, Mike, and decide to play jazz fusion, jazz odyssey thing, where they just play impromptu jazz. And David doesn't want to do it for a festival crowd. They walk out there, and there's 10 people. And I like they focus in on that guy in the stands, who's just sitting down with his thumb down.
Yeah.
The thumbs down. They're trying to play. It's just
rock,
so
that's
cringy.
what hit rock bottom,
It's just so cringy seeing those guys. Like,
I know.
their first show in New York, they were playing to thousands of people, and now they're just, no one's. So, they're just at their lowest part here, Mike, and they've got their final show wrap up party in LA. And backstage, as they're tuning up, Nigel comes back and confronts David and says, Dave says, "Well, you're here to see a real rock and roll band. What are you doing here?" And he says, "Well, I just wanted to come in and see how you guys were and tell you that one of their songs, Sex Farm, is hit the charts in Japan." And he kind of gives him the cold shoulder, and he goes out to perform the regular stage show. And about halfway through the first song, Mike, when they're rocking out, Michael McKean keeps looking over to the side stage, and he sees Nigel over there just chomping at the bit to go on. And one of my favorite scenes is he looks at him, and you can see like 40 years of history between these two guys. Just in one look, one nod, he just gives them the nod to say, "Come on in." He just gives the shrug to come, join him on stage. And then he does, and he comes in, and then he plays his guitar solo there. And they start jamming out, and they're rocking. They're starting to build this big crescendo, and then their drummer Mick blows up.
Of course,
he fulfills his destiny by spontaneously exploding in the drummers. But they use that explosion as a transition to them, a quick jump cut right to Japan, where they're playing in front of a thunderous crowd and thousands of fans screaming while they're playing. And I love that scene at the end where they're playing that, the end of the song, they had that sustained, the thing that the metal bands do where they just strum the same chord for like 5 bars and the drum is beating and they get that big splash at the end and that's how the movie ends. It's just a lovely little story.
It ends on a good night. You're watching this depressing downfall for all this time, and then you get that like nice uplift at the end. Where, okay,
yeah, it gives you hope.
They're doing all right.
Yeah, and we find that their new drummer's Joe Mama Besser, and I thought it was funny because Joe Besser was the Three Stooges guy that replaced all the Curlys after he died.
That's very clever.
But you just feel so good for them because they suffered through all that and they found new life in Japan, like a lot of 80s hair bands did. So let's talk about awards and accolades, Mike. So this had a dismal $30,000 opening on a $2.5 million budget, so not very big. It bombed. And Rob Reiner wrote a piece in New Yorker magazine about his theory on why I thought it bombed, because they did too good a job making it real. These actors were not well known, but they were talented musicians. They played all their songs, so people thought this was a real band. And the movie-going public said, "Well, why would I go see a movie about a band I've never heard of?" Not knowing they weren't in on the joke. And after this legacy on cable and video and DVD, after people got in on the joke, they knew what it was about. That's when they really gravitated to this film. But it only made $30,000. To give you some context there, Mike, Breaking 2 Electric Boogaloo made $6.7 million in its opening weekend. So it was just not very well received. But it's beloved by just about every major rock star on record. They all love this film. They say it's frighteningly accurate in terms of its depiction of the life of a rock and roll band. A lot of the as you mentioned, Mike, a lot of the events and activities in this film were based off real events. So it didn't receive any major awards at the time, but it has been named to Premiere Magazine's top 50 comedies of all time. It's the #1 Entertainment Weekly cult film of all time.
Oh, wow.
In 2002, it got entered into the National Film Registry, which we agree is a very big deal. This is the second film for Rob Reiner that got that recognition, along with Princess Bride. This is the only film on the Internet Movie Database that has a rating of 11 instead of 10. Get it, Mike? And the special edition Blu-ray, there's an extra 68 minutes worth of footage. Of course, there wasn't much of a script. They just they ad-libbed most of their dialogue. And I've seen this extra hour of footage, and it's amazing. It's just as funny. It should just be a sequel in and of itself.
I know.
They use a lot of this footage in the credits too, Mike. If you notice that after that rousing smash ending encore at Japan, they go right into the credits where they do band interviews, one-on-one interviews, and those are really, really clever.
Yeah, they are good.
I love the conversation. They're almost kind of insulting to talk about now, so commonplace, but that scene where he's talking about why the amps go to 11 is amazing because it entails the mindset of a rock musician. With those,
yeah.
He's just his whole life has been about music, and that scene where he's describing his shirt. He's got the rib cage on it. He says, "This is my exact inner workings done in a t-shirt." And Reiner's response is, "Well, it's not. It wouldn't be green." And then Christopher Guest gives he's that gotcha moment. He says, "But it is green." He points at it like he knew something.
The whole delivery of his lines is so deadpan and what you would expect from like a rocker who's just doesn't know anything else but music, just so.
Yeah, you can't even make fun of their intelligence level because they're so
No.
charming and endearing, and you know that these guys chose music over education and family life and a real job. This
Yeah.
is their passion.
They're in a bubble. They don't
Yeah,
know what exists outside of it.
exactly. Isolated. So, but just lovable characters and a lovable movie. So, let's talk about if we loved it or not, Mike. So this is a portion of our podcast we called our Grumpy Meter, which is kind of the premise where we kind of go back to films we watched as younger film goers and we kind of review them again as grumpy old jerks to see how our opinions changed on them one way or the other. So, Mike, we're gonna head off with you. Why don't you talk about the first time or the first era that you saw this film, and then on your most recent watch, what changed, if anything, and talk about the differences. So, head us off.
Yeah, I didn't see it when it first came out because I doubt it was showed anywhere around here, but I did see it on cable TV, and then I've seen a couple of different broadcasts of it on theaters, like reissues of it. I wanted to see the one this year that was the hilariously called the 41st anniversary showing, which I thought was really clever. But yeah, I hadn't seen it in a while, and but yeah, it's a perfect capsulation of a band that just like we were kind of saying, they're kind of pretentious in a way, and the fact it shows kind of the inner workings. One of the things I read when I was a teenager, which I loved, was this book called Hammer of the Gods, and it was a biography of Led Zeppelin and how they
Yeah,
came to prominence and just what they went through on tour. It's pretty lurid, some of the details in it. But
yeah,
it reminds me every time see this Spinal Tap, I think of that book because it's so similar. It's like here's this band on tour. Obviously, Led Zeppelin's a little popular, but the same, the producer, the Peter Grant kind of producer, like we were saying, the inner working between the guitarist and the lead singer, and getting on each other's nerves and just having this
yeah,
conflict that's outside of the band, which, like we say, anything that happens outside the band, these guys are clueless. Like even writing down foot and inches. I mean,
yeah,
just little things like that. It makes it hard to take, some of these bands we currently like real bands seriously when you watch something like this. And I guess that's for me, that was the best benefit of watching it. It's just you see people like Aerosmith or hey Dokken or other
yeah,
groups, and you can kind of take them seriously. But guys, they're just a singer in a rock and roll band. They're just up on stage to entertain us, and
yeah,
ultimately that's what this movie does, showing them behind the scenes, entertain us. And I'm sure there's plenty of true documentaries we've done on some of these bands, like we saw behind the music on VH1. Like
yeah,
I think of the documentary Styx or even Oasis, and just
yeah.
the true story is almost scarier than this mockumentary of This Is Spinal Tap, and almost more depressing when you see some of these real true stories. But it's the way they made it funny is just just really is what gets to me. Is it's depressing to see a rock band go through a downfall, but
Yeah.
the way the comedy is written by these three guys is so well done that
Yeah.
it's hilarious. It is a fantastic movie.
I agree with that awkwardness because this is what is currently viewed now as like one of the cringe comedies. But this one,
Yeah.
Hollywood is in love with the cringe comedy concept right now, and I hope they get out of it. It's kind of been overplayed, but this one has all the bones of that. But it's so funny and it's so well written and so funny that you don't feel uncomfortable with this cringe stuff. It's like it's necessary for the humor. It's kind of different element. So I didn't see this movie in the theater either, Mike, because of its limited release and the box office just kind of
Yeah.
died. So I kind of got introduced to it on HBO like everybody else did. And I probably watched this movie on a regular rotation. I probably saw it 100 times from the ages of 16 to 20. I was in a band myself then, like a teenage band, garage band, and we used this as our template to some of their songs. So they're kind of common rhythms and common progression of chords, and these songs were kind of easy to play, and we played some of their songs, and you know, it was because I was kind of, you know, engulfed in music at that time in my life. To see that kind of played out on screen like this was fun, so I really liked that. I probably gave it a 4 out of 5 as that. Yeah, I don't think I was attuned to all the satire and all that stuff
Yeah.
when I watched it at that age. Watching it again last week, it was a tough watch because it's currently not streaming everywhere because I believe on for those that are interested, July 22nd, this movie comes out in theaters for its 41st anniversary. So if you guys want to check it out in
Yeah.
theaters, we strongly encourage you guys to check that out. But you won't be able to stream it for a while. But watching, I was luckily I had a physical media copy of it, the old DVD I pulled out, and I hadn't seen it in, you know, 5, 10 years, and again, it's another, you know, trope of the show is when you go in and watch these things from a critical standpoint, you know, you watch it from a different perspective, and I laughed harder than I'd ever laughed before at this film now, because I finally got it, you know, and all the things that I missed that went over my head when I was just focusing on the musical part of it. It's just the absurdity and the empathy you feel for the situation and how well written it is and how the pacing is so good. Mockumentaries are tricky to pull off. Some other people, you know, outside of this like stable of actors have tried these things, and they're always kind of disjointed and a little, you know, disjointed. They're not really a smooth production. These things always flow
Yeah.
because there's a first, a second, and a third act to these things, and they tell a story. I think imitators kind of just forget that part, that there's a story arc to tell. But yeah, I couldn't believe how funny it was, and I kind of make an analogy to like the movie Ed Wood, Mike, and bear with me, I'll get there here in a minute. The movie Ed Wood, which is one of my favorite Tim Burton movies that was really underappreciated in his time, it was about, you know, this horrible filmmaker Ed Wood who made these horrendously terrible movies. But Ed Wood didn't know they were terrible. He just knew he loved to make movies. And I saw a similar theme kind of played out here where these guys were, you know, they're playing very hokey, pretentious, stereotype metal. But they don't know that. What they think every song they compose is the greatest song ever written. And there's that passion that artists have where they just get tunnel vision and they don't care about the reviews. They don't care about anything. They care about how much they love music, and that love of art just seems like it transcended. And I really like the way this it played out. It's just to see them, you know, playing to massive crowds and then playing to nobody. You know, just
Right.
there's a brief story. I saw a band, very famous band from Scotland called Glasgow, actually, Primal Scream, 100 years ago here in Charlotte, and I was a big fan of their band. I was in preparation to their show. I started watching videos on YouTube, and they were playing to like, you know, 80,000 people at Wembley Stadium. I was like, why, my God, these guys are coming to Charlotte. What's the deal? And I saw them in a little venue, and there was maybe 85 people in the venue. So this band that had just played to 80,000 people in Wembley, you know, a month later, were playing in a little dumpy little, you know, room in Charlotte holding 85 people. And because I'm so sensitive to those kind of things, I felt awkward that they were there.
Yeah, you get
having
like
to perform
secondhand
for us.
embarrassment.
Like, oh my God, you know, this city couldn't support them. Why would they even come out? But you know what? They came out and they killed that set. I mean, they came out and they gave it like this nonstop energy. And they said, you guys, no one's here, but come on down. We're going to party. And they just invited everybody down in the front. And they played this like 2 hour set where they just crushed it, you know? And like it, you have that level of artistry that I don't think we're ever going to have. Is, you know, it's rare that you come across people that love their art so much that they don't need the recognition for it. You know, I just got that vibe from them. Never mind. That's the kind of feeling I got from this movie too. It's like, you know, that's their whole world. You know, that metal music meant everything to them. So speaking of metal music meaning everything to us, me and Mike, music is probably our second love, if not our first love in a lot of cases. But you know, we have a long history with our love of metal music ourselves, and this movie kind of triggered our passion for heavy metal, and especially specifically 80s metal, and how wonderful that is. And that's pretty nostalgic too, Mike, because that doesn't really exist anymore. It's hard to find like a real metal band like that anymore. They've all kind of morphed into some sort of hybrid of rock or hip hop or some sort of rap metal or whatever. But There's a handful of bands in the 80s that were just iconic and just created the whole zeitgeist of metal. So we thought it'd be fun for this installment of You Just Made the List, Pal. Me and Mike are going to share with you our favorite metal bands in honor of this movie. So, Mike, why don't you kick us off? What's your list for your top metal bands?
I worked a little loose, hard and loose with the rules here, and wanted to concentrate more on hair bands.
Okay.
And the evolution of hair bands. Let's say
That Venn diagram intersects
right,
throughout the
and
movie.
I think the hair bands, they obviously start in the '70s. You have bands like Grand Funk Railroad, who famously have a guitarist that had hair down to his knees. Pretty cool.
Yeah.
And then the band I want to start with though was Boston. Excellent group. They very not very prolific. Really known for 3 albums. Basically one guy, even though they considered a rock band, hard rock band, if you will. Probably back in the day would have found them maybe on the heavy metal side of some album stores as possible.
Does White Band Afro count as hair
Yes,
band?
it does.
Okay. It doesn't have to be down, it has to be out.
You look at the look. I want anybody's listening and has their vinyl collection nearby. Grab your copy of Boston. The self-titled debut album. Look on the back of it. Okay, you're going to see 5 guys back there that have some of the greatest hair you've ever seen. Tom Schultz included. But I specifically wanted to mention Sib Haitian, the afro on this guy. He would make Bob Ross blush. The hairdo is incredible. The mustaches too, man. You talk about Harry Shearer modeling the Lemmy mustache. All at least 4 of these guys had the mustaches that were just the mutton chops. They were the Al Roboski kind of like Mad Hungarian mustache, and it's fantastic. And music's great too. I can't deny. Third Stage is one of my favorite albums of all time, which came out around 85, 86. Fantastic. I wish these guys had produced more. Well, when I say these guys, everyone knows Tom Schultz did all of the war heavy lifting. The bandmates that he's pictured with, by the way, were his touring group. They did not perform on the album, so which is the funniest thing I think. But anyway, Boston, that's my first choice.
There's a great internet meme that has this cover of the Boston photo shoot. They say, looks like the 5 guys your mom dated after her divorce in the 70s.
Yes. Oh, they look fabulous.
I won't argue there. So my first pick for my metal band is going to be AC/DC. One iconic album after the other. I think Back in Black is the second best-selling album of all time, right behind Thriller. That gives you some scale about how big they were. The Young brothers, Angus and Malcolm, started them way back when. It was funny. I was reading up about him a little bit in preparation for this little speech, and I read about Angus Young, his schoolboy outfit.
Yeah.
And that was his gimmick. But that wasn't the first one, Mike. He tried a few that didn't stick. One was he dressed up as Zorro. One he dressed up as a gorilla, and then another one he dressed up as a superhero. But he finally landed on the schoolboy, which I think is fantastic.
I didn't think the gorilla one had to be tough to perform.
How could you put that gorilla suit down?
I don't know.
To see Angus Young playing in a gorilla suit. Who said no to that? But this you lose track of how many great songs they had. They weren't necessarily a hair band. And then, of course, then Brian came in for Bond when Bond passed away, and they didn't even lose a beat. And then Back to Black was their kind of comeback album after that amazing song. But, whole lot of Rosie, one of the greatest songs ever written. Not a lot of ballads, Mike.
Not exactly, no.
They don't talk about love or loss. They talk about rock and roll and drinking and partying, and they've never broken format, Mike. They never had an experimental album like Metallica did with Lou Reed. They just rock, and they have been forever. And they're getting old, and Malcolm has passed away, and they can barely play anymore, but they're still out there. And so that's my first band, AC/DC, Mike.
Yeah, the essence of the band is still there, I guess so.
Yeah, it's a long way to the top if you want to rock and roll.
Yeah, and like Spinal Tap is a long way to the bottom. Yeah, my next band in the evolution of hair rock, I'm doing my quotes here, is Van Halen. Van Halen, who came out, late 70s, and famously, there's these two guys that were performing in the garage together, the Van Halen brothers, and they asked this Jewish boy who lived nearby, he said, "Hey, you want to join our band?" And here comes David Lee Roth out of nowhere. Guys had glorious hair. I mean, all four of them, even Michael Hall. Michael Anthony. Sorry, not Michael. Why do I get those two names confused?
They're so far apart.
I know, right? And they're so far apart, but yet so close in name. But yeah, all four of these guys had the feathered hair, especially. I'm not gay. Not that there's anything wrong with that, but Alex Van Halen's drummer hair was fabulous. And all their again, Van Halen's not one of those groups that messed around with until they joined. You got Sammy Hagar joined, and the less we say about that, the better. But they didn't have the love ballad. It was just you listen there 1, 2. You got several 1984 Diver Down.
Yeah,
that albums are all great rock and roll, and there's some hits and misses on some of these albums, but overall, you can't go wrong with them. And like I said, it's kind of like Boston. You could put them on that fine line between heavy metal and hard rock. They're in that little area, but of course they sold out a little bit by 1984. But that's okay. Panama is one of the greatest songs ever.
I will totally agree with you there.
And as much malign as David Lee Roth gets with his vocals, I mean, when you hear some of the noises he can make with his mouth, it's just fabulous. And once Sammy Hagar joined, they did the Phil Collins, Rod Stewart kind of mellowing, 5150, and it just kind of they started doing got a little too ballady for me, but that's okay. We still have Van Halen from the late 70s and early 80s, and that's my second pick.
That's a great one. Yeah, that was on my list too. They're just one of those bands that could do no wrong in the 80s. I mean, everybody had 1984, that tape in their car.
Oh yeah.
And then OU 812 came out. I'm like, I don't know. Van Hagar I was not a big fan of, but they got to like beer commercially at that point. But the next band on my list is kind of a sleeper pick here, but I'm going to go with The Cult. From England. It's led by, the long-maned Ian Astbury and the legendary guitarist Billy Duffy. He used to pal around with Morrissey, almost was in the Smiths, Mike, but he was on his own way to form this Southern death cult. And they became the Death Cult, and they became the Cult. Had a lot of post-punk, post-modern hits in the 70s, or in the 80s rather, and they kind of gravitated towards metal. They opened for Metallica, infamously, and like all Metallica guys, fans turned their back on them during their opening set to show their Metallica patches. But great guitar work. They've had some rotating members in the band, but Ian Astbury and Billy Duffy has been the staple there. Just dozens and dozens of hit songs that you don't really realize. They're one of those kind of sleeper bands that just lingers in the background and just kind of produces hits after hit. And still out on tour. They're coming to Charlotte here in a couple of months, doing a revival of the Southern Death Cult, but really heavy guitar riffs, fantastic drum work, and just essentially a hard rock band, but kind of live on that 80s metal band. So The Cult is my second pick, Mike.
Excellent.
Yeah.
Well, you want a couple honorable mentions?
Yeah, sure.
The first ones that came to mind for me was Rat, famous for their song Round and Round, their debut album, which one of the greatest album titles of all time, Out of the Cellar.
Yes.
Rat, just beautiful. But the hair on those guys, fabulous.
Yep.
Just just fabulous coifs on those guys. I'm going to throw in Cinderella, which is kind of similar in that group, another, 80s hair band.
That whole LA
it was an LA scene, like Motley Crue. That whole scene. Warrant, that was another
Whiskey,
group.
yeah.
They,
Yep.
famous for their cherry pie, but and Dokken, can't forget Dokken. Don Dokken had some of the greatest locks of any rocker. And
Rockin' Dokken.
Rockin' Dokken. Judas Priest, except for Rob Halford, the rest of the group had some good hair,
Yeah.
They had a lot of drummers too, kind of like Spinal Tap. But my third pick and probably my favorite '80s hair group was Poison.
Oh wow, look at you!
Led by the bandana wearing Bret Michaels and the screaming guitar of CC DeVille. But as previously said with Van Halen and Boston, these guys, their most famous songs were their ballads. I mean, how can you forget like "Every Rose Has Its Thorn" and "Something to Believe In"? These kind of just. You think of a packed arena listening, having the lighters lit, these songs,
If this band didn't exist, I would have never danced at any 8th grade slow dance for sure.
Oh, how could you not dance Unskinny Bop or Talk Dirty to Me? Come on, man. But but the hair, again, I go back to that. And then that's why my third and, my number one pick would be Poison. So there you go.
Yeah, I love all those like like I said, L.A. Sunset Boulevard, Whiskey, go-go bands. Those are all fantastic. I mean, they're all kind of the same band in a weird sort of way, but they were easy to make fun of back then, especially if you were into other types of music. But when you go back and listen to these driving rock beats and these chord progressions, they were really good musicians, really good bands. I really appreciate 80s metal a whole lot more now than I did, when I was like a 90s punk. So I've got some honorable mentions as well. I've always been a big fan of Anthrax, the band, not the
cow disease.
Yeah, I always thought that they had again, they were cut from the same cloth as those bands you mentioned. Really hard, really angry stuff. They had some collaborations very early with
"I'm the Man" is a great song
with Public Enemy. Yeah, so there's some great history there too. I was a big fan of Twisted Sister. I don't, they're easy to like lampoon, but Daniel Snyder's his name. Like not the guy that owned the Redskins, but
D. Snyder with the perfect
D. Snyder
with the perm. Yeah. He was one of the few hair bands that actually go out there with makeup and have the perm, man.
Yeah, when he famously went and spoke at in Congress to object to Tipper Gore's.
I was like, wow, that's D. Snyder? No way.
Well spoken, very articulate. Yeah. Really kind of sold the artist's argument about putting those labels on things, but what are you going to do? I always loved all his music as well. You talked about Quiet Riot. I was always a big fan of Slade. They're more of they were a 70s glam band that kind of morphed into, had some metal years in the 80s, but Quiet Riot stole a couple of their songs. Mama, We're All Crazy Now and Come On Feel the Noise. But they've got a lot of like really good rockin' hits that I always associate with the metal scene. But my number one pick, of course, has to be Kiss, right?
Of course.
The ultimate hair band. We talked a little bit on one of our side podcasts, Grumpy Nostalgia Remembers Only. We talked about this a little bit with our friend Aaron about the impact of Kiss. And being a child of the 70s, if I left Kiss off here, I would be remiss. So I had to put them in there.
So your Kiss is on your list. Is Kiss on your list?
Nicely done. Just Kiss, Mike. But, I was drawn in by all the theatrics and all that stuff when I was a kid. And I go back and listen to their music now, and it's solid. It's not great music, but it's got a good beat. You can dance to it, Mike.
That's right. I give it a 5. Maybe not.
But some would argue that Alice Cooper's probably a little, can claim the fame for having that theatrical thing, but they stole a lot of that from him. But the fact that they brought a lot of kids into music one way or the other, whether you like it or not. And can you hear "I Want to Rock All Night, Party Every Day" or "Detroit Rock City" or Dr. Feelgood? Can you hear those songs and not they're just fun to listen to? It used to be ironic for me, but now it's not. I actually like listening to that music. So Kiss is going to be my number one band for my 80s metal. Mike,
nice.
Even when they took off their makeup and did the lick it up stuff.
Oh yeah, but you put the X in sex.
I was born for loving you, baby.
Yes.
Which is a disco
that
song.
That bass. Oh, yeah. Fantastic.
But who's splitting here? We're not going to split hairs here, Mike. So, all right. So we've talked ourselves out of interest at this point, Mike. So let's just kind of wrap it up. So if you like what you heard today for some reason, don't forget to check out our Instagram page. That's at Grumpy Nostalgia. We have a fledgling YouTube channel. Check it out. Maybe you'll be the one. You can check out our webpage at grumpynostalgia.buzzsprout.com. We have all of our shows archived there, and there's a little contributor section. There's stuff that you can read about me and Mike, and there's a lot of podcasts you listen to and all that good stuff. So check out our webpage as well. So that's going to kind of wrap it up for this show. Mike, anything else you want to say to the gang before we get out of here?
Me and the boys will be playing all night.
That's right. And there's such a fine line between stupid and clever, right? And we demonstrated that quite frequently tonight. All right, so that's going to kind of wrap it up, guys. So for Mike James, this is Justin, and we'll see you again next time.
They're quite fearful. Yeah. That was my theory. They see us on stage with tight trousers. We've got, armadillos in our trousers. I mean, it's really quite frightening, the size.
Yeah.
And they run screaming